Welcome to the Wednesday, September 3rd meeting of the Planning Committee for the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. Let's go through here. There is no, okay. Item number B, public comments, an opportunity for members of the public to offer comments of items that are not on the agenda. I don't have any speaker cards. Is there anyone who would like to speak to us at this time? If not, we'll move on to item number C, approval of the minutes. There first.
I'll second. Hey, I wasn't at the meeting first.
As long as you've read them and agree with them, you can approve them. You don't have to abstain from not. At least that's from voting. As long as you've read them and say, "Gee, these look nice," I can agree with it. Okay. So I have a first and second. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes unanimously. On to item.
Yeah.
Onto the consent calendar. Is there anyone who would like to pull any of the items on the consent calendar? Is there anyone in the audience who would like to pull any of the consent members? Calendar. First and second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries unanimously. On to item 6.0, regular calendar events. Approval of amendment number 2 to agreement 347 with, a Vigingo Corporation for the continued service as a software vendor for a real-time ride-sharing pilot program.
I have this item, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Commissioners. Peter Engel, CCTA staff. This item is to approve Amendment 2 to Agreement 347 with Avigo Corporation. Avigo has the Karma real-time rideshare app that we have been doing pilots with. We have previously done a pilot here at the Contra Costa Center, currently in San Ramon at Bishop Ranch, and about to start a new little one in one of the neighborhoods in San Ramon. This amendment would be to add an additional $322,400 from a grant we received from the FHWA for a value-priced pilot program. This would be to do a project along the I-80 corridor in which we would do outreach to commuters that use that corridor. We would do outreach at businesses as well as park and ride lots. We would try and help capture the casual carpool crowd as well as others to make sure we get 3 people in the car and find an easy way to do that. I think one of the unique things about this is we are going to test a bridge toll rebate back to the people that carpool and pay the lesser bridge toll by being a carpool. Avigo is doing this in Austin, Texas on an express route, but we would use it to try doing it on the bridge tolls. So with that, I will just open it up for questions.
Questions of staff?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I don't know much of anything about this particular project, but I look. Want my mic on too? There you go. There's a lot of money. $800,000 for $850,000 for a software project, and my experience has been that that's pricey. And the question I want to ask is, it's got to do with how do you know that Avigo, or whatever they're called now, Karma, I guess, how do you know that they're making progress in the right direction? The reason I'm concerned about this, I have a very good friend, also my son, who worked for an agency as a consultant, and he was on the tail end of a software developer putting something together for an agency we all know and love around here. And the software developer did not perform, and nobody at the agency really knew what was going on. And I'm not suggesting that we operate that way, but just so that the question gets asked, how do you know that the software developer is doing what they're supposed to do?
Yeah, that's a good question. What we are able to get from Avigo is a daily, if we want, look at how the software is being used. The software actually registers the carpools, and that information is available that same day as to who's making trips together. All of the funding that we've been getting is really going into marketing and outreach. So it's not going back into development of the software. The development that Avigo does based on outreach and focus groups and feedback they get from people that are using it is their match that they're putting back into the program. All of the money actually goes out into marketing and outreach and actually communicating to users within that particular group. So it's almost becoming a behavior test. What do we need to do to bring the cost down per potential carpooler? The cost of acquisition of a carpooler to get them to start using the service. And that's what Avigo is really testing in these different pilots in different markets, the best way to do that outreach. So we are actually monitoring that through Avigo and the reports that they're able to get and their communication. They even can share their communication with us if we need it on how they're communicating with potential carpoolers.
So then I take it then they're not really developing the software on this particular project. They have a software package which they're trying to implement, and it's really a behavior project.
Right. So their software is an off-the-shelf software, but they do iterations to it based on feedback that they get from potential users. So there is some development in the back room based on making the user interface easy to use, the easiest way to communicate to people, and the way people want to communicate, whether it's via an instant message versus a phone call, an email, things like that.
Okay, fine, thanks.
Just one. Are the results to date encouraging, even though, it says that the results that they got in Bishop Ranch are similar to Contra Costa Center? How are we doing, right? Are we reaching, 5,000 people, but 5 are availing themselves of the opportunity, or is it too soon to tell, or what?
I'll let Martin jump in on this too, but I will start by saying I think we hope the numbers would be higher from Contra Costa Center and Bishop Ranch. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of immediate interest and a lot of signups. Mm-hmm. Keeping that going is it's
always the hard part.
Is the hard part. So, the BART strikes really put a big boost. A lot of people signed up. And what we're seeing now is the beginning to what we hope to be critical mass, which is where it becomes really easy for people to find that trip. This particular pilot along the I-80 corridor is a different animal than the other two. The other two were these spoken wheel, people coming in from all over to a specific work site. Yeah. Whereas this is more of a corridor base, so we expect to have kind of a more captive audience in that case, and it's a little easier to manage than people coming from everywhere. So we'll be able to compare those numbers to some of Avigo's other corridor studies that they're doing in other parts of the country, Austin and Washington, D.C., and previously in Seattle.
Good. Thank you.
Going back to Mike's question, do we have any goals? I mean, like you say, when it's said and done, when it's over, when the software is finishing developing, and we're satisfied that we've achieved something, do we have any goals, any numbers we're looking at? How are we going to judge this thing at completion?
Yeah, let me say something real quick before Martin jumps in. One of the things that has become something that we want to look at is that cost of acquisition. Yeah. What's the best? How low can we get that cost to acquire a particular driver, and what's the cost to not only acquire that either driver or passenger, but what's the cost to get them to a point where it just becomes an everyday thing and they do it every day, not just sign up. And then the other thing, of course, is vehicle miles traveled, air quality, emissions, all that stuff can be calculated through the software. We don't have a specific goal, but we do have, how are we improving through this process? Are those numbers getting better? Are they improving as opposed to a specific target?
Because I think eventually someone's going to come and ask us, you spent X amount of dollars, what did you accomplish? I mean, and I'm still on 80 right now, and there's still a lot of cars on 80. So there has to be some way that we can justify the expenditures and the dollars on this and say, this was a great investment or it's a great plan, or we admit in the end it didn't work like we wanted it to. I don't know.
Commissioners, this is like a research project in that we competed for the first allocation in the MTC's Climate Innovation Program. And we just everybody threw out ideas of how to increase ride sharing or how to reduce greenhouse gases. And so I asked the team to come up with an idea of how do we increase carpooling. One of the ideas was let's mirror what Don Tatson does or used to do when he went into San Francisco, and that is he used to casual carpool, is what they call it on the West Coast. And he'd get in a car with a complete stranger and go to San Francisco to avoid the toll, and then likewise the driver went to San Francisco with two people in the car, so he avoided paying the toll. So everybody was happy. So the idea was we had to use a commercially available off-the-shelf software. There's no development costs paid for by these grants. And so MTC, we had three counties that had virtually the same idea, Sonoma, Marin, and us. And so they split the money three ways. I think it was $500,000 each. And then they had some money left over, and we thought that we needed more marketing right after the BART strike. We saw this humongous increase because people couldn't get over the hill or the bridge, and they had to find ways of getting ridership. And we thought, wow, that's a great opportunity. Even though it's bad for the economy, those kind of things help jumpstart this innovation. Then I asked Peter to put in an application for this value pricing pilot program. That's a national competition. And I was at the Transportation Research Board, sat next to Alan Greenberg, and I said, hey, we got this great application for the value pricing pilot program. He said, I saw it. And he said, it's much like what we've seen before. I said, no, in this case, we're not going to do a point-specific location. With yours, we'll do it more on a corridor. So one of the innovations that these demonstrations have shown is that there may be an opportunity to use the software because you have 3 cell phones activated in the same location. You may be able to get occupancy, to validate occupancy on a toll facility or on an HOV lane. Because right now, you can't count the number of people in a car, and it's pretty difficult. But with this software, you may be able to validate there are 3 people or 2 people in your car for tolling purposes. And that's what Texas is doing. And so Peter's got the ball now and taking a look at a corridor application for this software. But at the end of the day, it's not one of those projects to say, yeah, we're going to build X miles of roadway for you or 7 bridges. We're going to try to figure out a way of incentivizing using technology the idea that more people should carpool or can carpool or know where to go to carpool. And that's the idea.
So obviously the outreach for a point-specific must be somewhat different than a corridor-specific one. I'm just curious how you're adapting the marketing for 80, and in particular to get the casual carpoolers, which that's a large group of people on the 80 corridor, but there's a lot of different spots.
Yeah, we're still working with Avigo, and we'll be working with the WICTAC 511 office, and we're going to work with them to do outreach to employers in West County that have access. We're also going to look at carpool lots specifically, in the northern end, so Hercules and maybe even Cortola and Vallejo, where a large number of people get in and start crossing the bridge. So those are going to be our primary, and then what we'll do is we'll regather and look at how that's working and see if there's some opportunities that come from that would work better.
So it would adapt as you go along.
Yes.
Thank you.
Following on from Kevin's question, put yourself out 5 years from now and look back at this project, and at this project now finishing its 5th year under whatever you're doing. How are you going to say, man, this was successful? By what criteria are you going to be able to measure success? Now, if you can't answer it now, I'm not surprised, but I think you're going to have to think that through really, really hard, because a lot of these things, maybe it's just a beaten out. It's not going to work. Maybe it is, because you're talking about behavior here. How are you going to know you change behavior in a meaningful way?
Yeah, we are talking about behavior. That's exactly right. So I think you're letting me off the hook by saying I can't answer it now. And I think all we can say is we need documentation of when we did this, when we provided this incentive, when we did this, we moved the needle this much. When we tried this, we didn't move the needle at all. So I think it's that behavior issue we're trying to go after. I will add, with this bridge toll rebate, MTC is very interested in this data, and we are looking at them for data as well as how many people are using the carpool lane on the bridge, so that we can do a before and after and see how much that needle changes based on when Avigo starts to provide rebates to Avigo users that then cross the bridge through the carpool lane. And it may change how MTC looks at charging tolls or providing toll rebates for carpoolers. I mean, I don't know. So that would be one thing that we could look at in the future to see how these pricing policies and incentive policies help move that needle. If they do, they may not.
Any other questions of staff? I have no speaker cards. Is there any comments or questions from the audience? No? Thank you. Can I get a motion?
I'll move approval.
First and second. I haven't been doing this in the past. I got a first by Durant, second by McCoy. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. On to 7.0, approval of a recommended PDA planning grant program. A question in this here, because I have represent the city of Oakley, and the city of Oakley has a grant in here. Is there anything, do I need to recuse? Do I need to step aside? Okay.
I'm not a lawyer,
Okay.
but I think Brad has some great information for you that'll make that point move.
Okay.
Whether or not you should vote for it or not.
I think he just told you you're not getting any money, but all right.
No. No. Good evening. Good evening. MTC gave the authority $2.745 million for the PDA planning grant program in Contra Costa. The grants are meant to provide support in planning for PDAs in areas such as providing housing, jobs, intensified land use, promoting alternative modes of travel to the single occupancy vehicle, and parking management. And to carry out the program, we did two things in the last several months. First, what we wanted to do was at first identify a list of consultant teams that can provide the services to local agencies who have these planning activities, and then to select those planning activities. In March, we released an RFQ, a request for qualifications from consultant teams. We got 14 of them. Sat down with a review committee of local staff, and together we winnowed that down to 6 teams that we interviewed. And then the committee recommended 5 of those to provide the services. There are Arup, Opticus Design, Perkins and Will, Ramey and Associates, and Wallace, Robert, and Todd, or WRT. 3 of those, Arup, Perkins and Will, and WRT, are pretty general, and the committee thought they could do just about any of the planning activities their teams could that would be requested. And 2 of the other teams, Ramey has a focus on health and design, which some jurisdictions might be interested in, and Opticus has a lot of experience in form-based codes that some jurisdictions might also be interested in. In June, we released a call for projects, and in response, we got 10 applications requesting $2.72 million. You'll notice that's less than the amount available, about $29,000. The projects range from market assessments in Martinez and Oakley for their PDAs, some implementation activities such as updating zoning code and providing streetscape guidance as part of the specific plan in downtown Moraga, to a full-blown specific plan for north downtown Walnut Creek. We had another committee to review those projects, and the committee thought that they were all basically consistent with the purposes of the program. There were some questions about the marketing aspects of the City of San Pablo project, but other aspects of it they felt were consistent. We still have to work out exactly what that scope would be. So we expect that the $29,000 that's left over will be necessary to make some adjustments in the scope and budget. But it's a good thing. All areas of the county receive some funds, 41% in Central County, 28% in West and Southwest, and 4%, that's the Oakley project, in East County. The next step is we have to go through the process of marrying the consultants with the sponsors, and then doing contracts and with the consultants and MOUs with the sponsors, and then to oversee that whole process. To help with that, we have the authority previously approved the contracting with two contract managers who will look over the process and help us with that. One of whom, Paul Fassinger, is in the audience tonight. Once the authority approves the list and both consultants and projects, we will start that whole process, and we're asking tonight for your approval of both lists. So if you have any questions?
Yeah, and thank you. Incidentally, how's your health after your accident?
Shoulder's still a little sore, but I'm okay.
You're looking pretty good. I'm glad to see you're up and running. Question is this. You've got this stable of consultants, 5 of them. And you have a list of, what is it 10? 10 different projects. How are you gonna marry the consultants teams with the projects?
What we hope to do, the first thing we'll do is we'll talk to the project sponsor and say, here's the list. We're gonna once you all approve the 2 lists, we're gonna send out the qualifications for each of the teams, for all 5 of the teams, to the sponsors and say, here's their qualifications. Which team do you think would work best with you? And it could be the whole team. It could be a part of the team. It could be just one sub-consultant or 2 sub-consultants on the team actually do the work. And then we would work with that selected consultant and the project sponsor and try to come up with a scope, schedule, budget for each of the planning activities. I know Moraga's case, there are 2 really specific activities. One is updating the zoning code to match the specific plan that you have, and also to provide more detail on the streetscape and components of the specific plan. So I could see in that case we have 2 sub-consultants on a team that the contract would cover and the scope of work would cover.
Got it. Thank you.
We would be bringing all those back to you for approval once we get all the details worked out.
Any other questions? Once again, I have no speaker cards, so
Move approve.
you got it first.
I'd make a comment.
Okay.
Yeah, this is, I'm glad, Moraga's will be one of the beneficiaries of this, and so locally. In Moraga's case, we are not flush with cash, and to do the kinds of things like clean up the code to get the zoning consistent with the land use designations of a specific plan, it's just it kills us. We can't do it. We just haven't got the resources. So with this is really a rescue, and I bet you there's some others on the other project sponsors who feel the same way. That this kind of thing is exactly what we need, because to make these PDAs work, it takes a lot of money, and we've been looking at it as just another big unfunded mandate. Well, this is helping us get through it, and it's very welcome.
Good job.
So we have a first. Second. First and a second. First by Durant, second by Metcalf. All in favor?
Aye.
Any Passes unanimously. On to item 8.0, 0. Updated,
Cut you back on the cut back on the Diet Pepsi.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Update on Senate Bill 743, draft guidelines for transportation impact analysis in CEQA.
Yes, thank you, Chair Romick. The California State Senate passed Senate Bill 743 just this last September. The bill makes several changes to CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, affecting projects that are located in transit priority areas, or TPAs. You may also know them as TODs or PDAs. But they define them as sites or corridors that are well served by transit. The major change affecting our local jurisdictions and the authority is the removal of level of service, or LOS, along with other vehicle delay-based measures as findings of significance under CEQA going forward. So the bill also allows for this same removal of the delay-based measures outside of TPAs. And level of service would still be allowed in local planning and traffic studies, but not under CEQA analysis. Our previous comment letter, which we sent to the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, OPR, back in March, supported the removal of level of service as a finding of significance under CEQA in TPAs, but we were concerned about the removal of level of service as a significance under CEQA outside of TPAs or areas that are underserved by transit, as there are many of those around the county. In August, the Governor's Office of Planning and Research released its preliminary draft on the updated CEQA guidelines, which outlines the new measures that would be used in CEQA analysis, and this would be going forward. The primary measure for newly proposed projects which fall under CEQA would not be level of service, would be vehicle miles traveled, or VMT. And OPR staff decided to recommend that this be used in place of LOS, as I said, statewide, inside and outside of transit priority areas. So at the August meeting of TCC just a couple weeks ago, the Technical Coordinating Committee, local staff discussed the new guidelines and their concerns. Staff has developed a comment letter, which is found in attachment A in your packet, to OPR, and based on the TCC discussion. And I'll just quickly go through the main points of our comment letter. First, on the implementation of the guidelines, while OPR has a phased approach in terms of timing, we are encouraging OPR to conduct a trial period so that the VMT analysis tools can be tested and best practices would be established. And we would also hope to include training for local staff in dealing with the new guidelines. On the use of regional averages, OPR recommends using a regional VMT average to determine whether or not a project's impacts are significant, whether you're above or below. So we're saying having the option of a county average or a smaller geography average would be helpful in a large, diverse place like the Bay Area when we're competing against places like San Francisco that are going to have a much lower VMT. On impacts on transit vehicles, because vehicle delay can impact not just private vehicles, but transit vehicles trying to access these transit priority areas. It was suggested that establishing like a mitigation bank, a pot of money to help mitigate these impacts in those areas specifically for bus service. On the use of appropriate tools, the guidelines identify tools for calculating VMT, but we are asking for more guidance on what types of tools are used when and where, whether we're using regional models, county models, or doing off-model analysis. We're just asking for more detail in the guidelines. On the idea of induced travel, this is a concept that is heavily debated on what types of transportation projects induce travel. And once again, we're asking for more detail in the guidelines of what types of projects are applicable here, and how the locals should deal with that in having to prove in having to analyze induced travel in their CEQA analysis. Finally, the guidelines require a local agency to document a project's effect on the consumption of fossil fuels and alternative fuels, and the overall cost effectiveness based on the impacts to energy consumption. And local staff has indicated that that's pretty onerous task to take on, especially for our smaller jurisdictions that may not have the resources available to them. So those are our 6 comments that we've put in the draft letter in your packet. Comments are due to OPR by October 10th, and staff recommendation is to transmit the letter to OPR. That's my presentation.
Just one quick question. Do we have any sense for why OPR is looking as broadly as the sort of the MTC service area for one set of criteria, but for this latter criteria, the energy impacts, they're actually looking at such a small unit as a city?
I don't have good insight there. I know the use of regional averages. Most MPOs or RTPAs, regional transportation planning areas, aren't as large as the Bay Area. They might be, 5 counties in the Central Valley that are all pretty similar. Mm-hmm. So I think that's why they picked regional there, but
okay.
I'm not sure on the energy consumption.
Okay. Fundamentally, I like the letter and how it's crafted. I think the points made are good and reasonable. It does seem a little odd for particularly cities, smaller cities that are along major corridors like, for example, the 680 corridor, how you're going to have any way to measure the impact of any of this on the overall fossil fuel usage or the pollution or anything else for that matter, and that kind of a corridor's kind of misses the, I don't know, I don't get it, but thank you.
Mike.
Yeah, quite know where to start here. I was astonished when I read this report and read all the attachments, and I reread it, and I'm still astonished. There's a lot of things they're doing. I guess the first thing to ask is, I was struck by the aggressive timetable that OPR is saying. They want to put this thing into place, if I understood you correctly, January of 15?
Even earlier for projects in TPAs.
Oh, that's even worse. January 15th is
actually,
bad enough.
It would be, I believe it's January 1st, 2016 for statewide. But yeah, and actually for projects in TPAs, it would start immediately.
Okay, so that's just 3 months away. Okay, that's the first jaw dropper. The second one is when I read the original letter you sent to them, which I thought was very good. I was trying to get a feel, as to whether or not they took on board what you said and suggested to them, or they just ignored it? What's your sense?
I don't want to say whether they ignored it, but we kind of had the feeling in conversations at the CMA level with OPR staff that was the direction they were heading kind of from the beginning. So I don't want to say they already had their mind made up, but they kind of did.
That's what I suspected you were going to tell me. Thank you for being honest. Okay, I asked a town manager in Moraga today about this. And this whole thing has occupied a fair amount of discussion in our own staff. And I asked her if she was prepared to assess energy impacts of various projects, and there was no response. It was on the telephone. I said, "Are you there?" And she said, "Well, no, we have no idea how we're going to do this." And I asked her, I said, "Well, what about the army of consultants that we rely on? Do they have any feeling for how they're going to be able to make this work?" And it isn't just energy impacts, it's a lot of the other things. And she was very polite in answering the question, but the gist I got unmistakably was they haven't a clue. They really are. This is something that's really going to be a tough one to come to grips with. And if OPR has this aggressive schedule, I see a train wreck coming down, because if you have a project which goes in for, its EIR is going in, and it's a decision is made against the project on the basis of these new criteria, I can easily see some project proponent being upset, and I can just imagine what their lawyers are going to do. And how in the world can you defend a decision based on this kind of stuff? I mean, it's just it's like they're asking us to well, it's a lot of it's bad policy, I think, let alone bad law. It's just, I don't know. I'm dying to hear what I was hoping David Durant would be here, because I'm dying to hear what he'd say. He's being very polite, not saying it. Okay. Well, my point is, I think it's you're in for a little trouble here, because there's just too many loose ends, and the phased approach is certainly a way to do this, a sensible idea. And are they willing to take that on? Or is that being ignored?
Well, they hadn't the comment in our letter with regard to phased approach with like a pilot program. Yeah. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
I haven't heard them discuss that. That came up at TCC, and
so they have OPR has no inkling of this yet.
Their phased approach is based on basically whether you're in a TPA or not.
Oh boy. Okay.
TPAs would come online first, outside of TPAs later.
Then induced travel. When I read that, I said, well, what about, how about unintended consequences? I mean, you put together a project, and I'm thinking, in the case of Moraga, our whole concept in the specific plan area is to try to develop commercial, residential, in a way that the place becomes a magnet. So you start reversing some of that traffic flow. So you're going out of town and come in town. And that's going to be good for us for sure, and probably good for our neighbors. But we have no idea whether they'll be successful. We have no idea. First of all, the landowner that owns most of the property doesn't want to do anything. So we have a real problem there. We don't know whether, we know what we want to try to achieve, but we have absolutely no idea whether it's going to be successful or not. So if we're to, talk about induced travel in the EIR, it's pretty speculative. And in EIR, isn't it supposed to be based on the worst scenario from an impact statement standpoint? And I'm bewildered.
Yeah, and I think that was the concern that TCC had. They see it the same way, and there's so much debate about what types of projects induce travel. Does repaving a road, cause more people to drive on? I mean, that's kind of an extreme, but goes all over, there's a whole spectrum of debates going on there.
Oh, I'll take the bait, Mike. It's interesting because the more, sort of we look at this and its evolution, the more it's designed, or it feels like it's designed for specific development projects, not for some of the things that local jurisdictions end up having to do environmental reports on. And I'm not sure how to really communicate that, but for something like a specific plan, this seems like a grossly ugly, inadequate, poorly constructed, poorly conceived tool. If it's a 100-unit apartment development, the local jurisdiction, it seems to me, can foist onto the developer / applicant the responsibility for coming up with these measures and tools, and then, sort of giving the agency the opportunity to evaluate it in light of the criteria. So in one sense, it feels very much like it creates a tool that could be useful for communities that don't want massive physical development or want a way to force folks to spend money to identify the impacts and those sorts of things. But I'm not clear from anything we've seen today or back a few months ago that there's really any thought to the way the environmental documents are actually used today. What projects, quote unquote, actually require CEQA review, get CEQA review, and how you would utilize this for things like that. So I'm tending to agree with you. I think it's a lawyer's field day in a bad way, and for the non-specific uses, it just feels like a disaster for local government.
I agree. It just seems overly burdensome. And, perhaps it would be useful in very select, specific projects, but to have it this sort of across the board just seems very burdensome to particularly smaller jurisdictions.
Right, as you commented, it looks like a jobs program. For us, forcing us to hire people that we don't need all the time. To me, the last item means, I think, if there's ways of on the energy impacts of highlighting that even more, onerous is an appropriate term. If we could add another paragraph in there to maybe more melodramatically describe the effects it could have on local jurisdictions, especially smaller ones that aren't looking to hire additional staff or even consultants to run this process through everything that we may need to have a EIR for. Mike.
Yeah. Did the League of California Cities have a position on this legislation?
They did, and they were aligned with us, as I recall. They were concerned about the elimination of LOS and delay-based methodologies. Well, they're a big group, but the comments were all over the place, and there are a lot of people out there that would just as soon kiss level of service goodbye. So it's coming from many different directions. But I do recall the League's letter voiced concerns about elimination of LOS across the board. OPR took that under consideration, but as Matt mentioned, they've marched in the other direction, and they're going strictly to vehicle miles traveled.
Is there a reason? Well, I know there is a reason, but on the draft letter, as I read it, after I was in the second reading, I said, this is awfully polite. Here we are trying to, when you listen to the comments here, and I can just imagine when the full board gets a hold of this, why are we writing such a placid letter? Why don't we say what we really feel?
Sorry, I guess that's the way my mom raised me. but we can toughen it up a bit.
A forward letter might do.
I don't have a speaker card, so we'll assume there's no audience participation in this one. Do I have a motion? A motion
Yeah,
with
I'll-
a caveat.
Okay. No, I'll move. We send the letter as is. I share Mike's, shall we say, thought that we may wish to communicate more strongly. It feels like it's just going to fall on deaf ears, and it kind of becomes one of those places where I'd rather not do the short letter to follow. If there really is no meaningful opportunity impact outcome. If we had a better sense of the fact that we had other partners in this who would be coming on strongly, that would provide some air support, or if we really thought that there might be some useful impact to doing so, I'd be inclined to go a different direction. But I do think the letter captures the essence of the issue, albeit nicely.
Commissioners, maybe what we need to do is Lindsay and I will check in with not only the League of Cities to see where they are, but we'll also check in with CalCog. CalCog had Ken Alex at their meeting talking about this issue. And I'll find out what their position is, and we'll see if it's stronger. We'll mirror that. If it's placid, we'll mirror that as well, but we'll bring that to you by the board meeting. In fact, we may send it out early if we can get that information, so you get a feel for what the league is saying, but more importantly, what CalCog is saying, because I think CalCog's position mirrored more of what we thought. But they had Ken Alex at the meeting talking about this issue.
Love it. Okay. Yeah, I'm good with that.
I need a second on this, yes.
I'll second.
Okay. So I have a first by Durant, second by McCoy. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 3-1 with Metcalf disagreeing. On to item number 9, other business. There are none. 10.0 news clippings and correspondence. There are none. Item number 11, adjournment to the next meeting, which is Wednesday, October 1st.
Woohoo.
Okay. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you.